Hello, welcome back to LIVENODING. In this episode, I want to share the breakdown on how I created this hairy ball. So this setup is actually really simple and basics, but I think if you are learning geometry nodes, this is like something that you need to understand 100%, and you need to be able to recreate this under 10 minutes every time. So yeah, this is basically, I started with an icosphere, right? With an icosphere with a lot of subdivisions. If you have just like a smallest subdivisions, and I will increase the radius, you can see the fur or the hair or the instance is being distributed on the face because the triangle of the icosphere. If I increase the subdivisions, then we see less of that because we are distributing more on the smaller area. So that's one thing to know first of all. So the icosphere with a glowing material set, the pink material. And then we have these parts of the fur or the hair of the instance, which is basically started just being a curve. Okay, so curve with different length that's being distributed using Poisson disk with this distance radius that you can adjust. You can actually make it really thick until the core is no longer visible, but for now just keep it simple. You can adjust the density factor from here, randomize the seed. So the seed, of course, is really important, and you want to always randomize this using group input. So okay, anyway, distribute points on faces, and each point's replaced by curve line, and then I randomize the size of each curve. Okay, and then I realize the instance. So this is really important nodes. It's turning each one of them into real like a real geometry, and then I can resample it here using counts or the length. Okay, so it's totally up to you which one you want to use, but I think I'll just be using count for now. And after I do that, I set the position of each curve and randomize it using noise, and each one of them is getting random value from the index. So random value goes into the W, and then each one of them is being controlled by time. Okay, so they're all, that's why they're all wiggling. So this is the speed. I will pipe this out as well as a value, and this should be a speed. So value, speed of wiggle. Okay, all right, so the next one, I add the noise with this minus 0.5 value, so to normalize the noise, and then set the curve radius. Okay, this is the interesting one. If I didn't do that, each of this curve radius will just be the same. But if I plug this, each one of them is actually different. But this is actually like a different radius per point. There should be a way to have a different radius per curve. Okay, so that's something that I still need to think about. I think we could use a capture attribute or transfer attributes. That should be possible before we turn each curve into separate entity. I want to have different radius per curve, not per point. In this case, it's already like a point, so each one of them is different size per points. That's why we have this kind of look. But that's something to think about. I need to ask some other Blender users. So we have this result, and we can create duplicates and we also can randomize the seed and the ID, the wiggle speed. I think if we can make this smaller, it's wiggling faster. So I think this is like super basic, but also really important. And if you don't need to memorize this, but just you need to understand what's going on. So each curve is being instant, and then each curve is being resampled. Each one get different radius, etc., etc. I have another example here, which is similar. This is just a Soothball with an eyeballs. This is from Ghibli anime. You might recognize this. So this one is very similar. The way I do this, I think the eyeballs can have, you can have more eyeballs, but in this case just less eyeballs. So it's a fur ball creature from Totoro. I did this slightly differently. So I started with a simple mesh line, and then I think I'm using curve, and then I kind of randomized the rotations and the scale. So I started with a single curve like this, and then I actually duplicated many times while randomizing the rotations, similar to the other setup, except that I'm doing it just slightly differently. If I reduce the number, you might see a little bit better, but anyway, maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, I create like random points, and then I have a curve here that's being instanced on that points, and then I rotate each of the curve randomly until it's become like a spiky furball, and then I also randomize the curve length, the size, and then the same deal, I realize the instance, set the position, and randomize each one of the curve, offset it, and then I'm using curve to mesh, turn it into real geometry, and I set the material, and that's pretty much the fur. So I think that's the one thing to remember with geometry nodes. You can easily create like a fur instances. Okay, so it's like a, yeah, like a hair. And then for the eyeballs, it's just basically UV sphere. One of them is slightly offset for the eyeballs, and it's each one of them is getting different materials. So there's the white part and the black part. Join geometry, set the shade smooth, and then I scale the eyeballs, and then I just distribute the eyeballs randomly on a UV sphere, so it's still like rounded. And after I do that, I just rotate it randomly. So this is like another example that's super basic, but also really important to know. So we end up with this Soothball. If you render this out, it looks like the creature in a Totoro anime. So yeah, I think this is also super important to understand how to create. So if you understand this one and the other one, then it's a good basic geometry nodes concept to understand, and from there you can create 100 or 1,000 different variations of the same setup. Basically, maybe if you want to make like a cables, each one of them with random radius, you can use a similar setup. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Hopefully you find this interesting and useful. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.